My Lords, I find it difficult to express how strongly, firstly, I am amazed, and secondly, deeply, deeply dismayed that any British government of any complexion should produce before Parliament a bill which contains the provisions of Part 5 of this bill. I never expected in my parliamentary career, which has not been a short one, to find myself reading a bill of this kind presented for parliamentary approval. It's already been said, and will be said many times in this debate, it appears to give the government unfettered power to break, in any way it finds necessary, particular provisions of a treaty upon which the ink is barely dry. I will not attempt, and I don't have the time, to compete with the undoubted eloquence of the noble Lord Judge and my noble friend Lord Howard, who have expressed very much the shock which I think everybody who has any regard for the rule of law in this country undoubtedly feels. So let me just move slightly to my more familiar field, although I'm certainly a long-practiced and experienced lawyer, and just talk about the politics that underlines this, which I also find quite bizarre and completely inept. The origins of the need for this bill are quite extraordinary. Of course, it all arises from the decision taken shortly after the referendum that Brexit would involve leaving the single market and the customs union. Now, I strongly disagreed with that. I think we could have left the European Union and remained. I actually moved a motion in the House of Commons and got within 6 of a majority for staying in the customs union, which is nearer than the then Prime Minister, Theresa May, unfortunately got to achieving for anything. But that is not the issue today. I accept that we are committed to leaving the single market and the customs union. I accept the judgment of Parliament and the population, but it does give rise to all the problems that the government does not know how to solve. Once you leave the customs union and the single market, you need a customs frontier between your own internal market and the rest. I mean, it's wholly in accordance with all the ordinary practices of international trade in modern times, WTO rules and all. And everybody knows that at Dover this could create a very considerable problem, and we're preparing to recruit the people, get the lorry parks, handle the traffic, get people to prepare for the paperwork that is involved. The problem, of course, arose in Ireland, which no one seemed to have thought about very clearly, until they realised to do the same in Ireland would totally undermine that extremely important agreement to the security of the United Kingdom and of the Republic, the Anglo-Irish Agreement. So the solution was determined that Ulster should stay in the customs union and the single market, and Great Britain would leave. And that means we have a customs frontier down the Irish Sea. Now, this wasn't a sudden or ill-considered thought. It was argued about very vigorously. The Democratic Unionist Party, otherwise firm Brexiteers, supported the whole agreement, they opposed the whole agreement on that basis. But the fact remains, we have committed ourselves to actually having a frontier. The proper thing to do now is not to go back on our word with no solution. It's quite unclear what the government really proposes by way of essential customs controls that are still compatible with the agreement. We should minimise the necessary delays, as I hope we're doing in the negotiations with the EU. If we insist on changing standards, we should have equivalence of standards. We should have arbitration procedures to settle disputes. We should make sure disruptions to trade, delays at the border, costs are as little as possible. But the idea we solve the problem, as I say, it isn't quite clear what would happen if you just leave a hole so far as controls between Ireland and the GB is concerned. the session is we break the rule of law. I realise I've only got 4 minutes to talk on this matter, which I do think is one of the bizarre arrangements in this chamber I'm getting used to, because no other parliament in the world would think that people can do justice to the contents of this bill 4 minutes at a time in the way we're doing. But I add my voice and I will oppose Part 5 in particular in every way in which my membership of this House permits me.